Welcome to Business Reporter's Future of Retail campaign. I'm Rachel Hicks. E-commerce has seen spectacular growth over recent years, especially during the pandemic. But attracting traffic to your online store is one thing. Converting that traffic into actual revenue is quite another. The fact is that shopping cart abandonment is still shockingly high. Around 75% of items consumers put in their carts online will go unpurchased. The reason for this high rate of failed transactions is friction, the extra burden that merchants and payment processors put on shoppers in order to ensure transactions are genuine and data is safe. So how can retailers reduce friction without jeopardizing the safety of transactions and payments? That's what we're going to discuss today with Rajesh Ramanand, co-founder and CEO of Signifyd. Good morning, Raj.
Good morning.
The traffic of online retailers has grown spectacularly in recent years, and especially during COVID. Has the quality of the shopping experience improved to the same extent?
Not really. If you look at the problem today, retailers have to deal with a lot of online fraud, and they have to take the liability that comes with it. To protect themselves, they introduce a lot of checks into the process that adds friction for the buyer journey and for the end consumer. If you look at this on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being the worst level of experience, I think we're at about a 7 today.
What about those retailers who choose to ignore the problem of fraud?
The long and the short of it is that you cannot really ignore fraud. It will bankrupt you. And so you eventually come back to having to put those checks in place, and once you start doing that, it will introduce friction into the buying journey.
So where does all that friction occur exactly?
The friction occurs across the entire buyer journey of a customer. We'll talk about 3 areas here today. The first is at the point of checkout, when somebody is trying to buy something. The second is pre-checkout, before they buy something. And then we talk about post-checkout, which is after they purchase something. So at checkout, the biggest level of friction we have today is declining good users. That means a person trying to buy online that is considered fraudulent, and because of those checks that retailers put today, you turn away a lot of good users. The second is at pre-checkout, which most of us have experienced at some point. When you try to buy something online, most retailers force you to create an account with them as opposed to just finishing the checkout, and the drop-off rates over there are pretty high. And then finally, at post-checkout, you're starting to see returns becoming a massive problem, where people are buying something and want to return it, but they have to wait 7 to 20 days to get the cash back on their credit card. And so when you look at it, the friction exists across the entire buyer journey.
What are the consequences of that friction for retailers?
It's lost sales. And when you look at it, there are 2 parts to this. The first is the very tangible lost amount that comes from that sale. And this amounts to about $300 billion and growing on an annual basis. The second is somewhat intangible, but is a massive problem in itself, which is the customer lifetime value. Studies show that when a customer is declined, 50% of the time they don't come back to the store to complete that transaction or any future transactions. And so it's really important to look at this from a perspective that if a customer buys 5 to 10 times from you in the life of purchasing, you've not just lost that one sale, but it could be 5 to 10 times the value of that sale. And so when you add both of these up, it's a pretty significant problem in terms of lost sales for these businesses.
What's the solution to this problem?
Retailers should do what they do best, which is to sell more of their products. The liability for fraud should not be on the retailer, but on the fraud solution provider that is equipped to not only solve this problem, but also to manage and take the liability associated with this.
So how does Signifyd achieve that?
Signifyd provides an instant decision on every online order, letting the retailer know if it's good or bad. If Signifyd says it's good and it turns out to be fraud, Signifyd takes the full liability for that transaction. That includes the cost of the product, the shipping costs, and any other fees associated with it. On the other hand, if Signifyd declines a transaction, we don't charge the retailer because we want to make money only if the retailer makes money.
How does your solution work exactly?
We have built the world's largest trusted commerce network, protecting more than $300 billion in online sales. Sales and transactions help us build patterns of what is good and bad, and therefore helps retailers to protect against fraudulent activity. So as an example, a first-time buyer at, say, a new retailer's site may have already been seen in the Signifyd network 3 or 4 times, and therefore we can quickly tell the retailer if this is a good or bad transaction. And so what this means for a retailer is that they can remove the security checks that come with this, and that then eliminates the friction in the customer's buyer journey.
So let's say I'm a CEO and you have just convinced me. How do we start working together?
It's quite simple, actually. There are just 2 steps. The first step is we take a look at your business and analyze the value we can bring to the business. And the second step is we work through an integration. And that integration can be as small as giving us a small portion of your traffic to start with. This could be just your declines. Or we can work with your entire traffic to manage and protect every transaction that comes with it.
If this is so clean cut and the potential impact is so high, why isn't everybody doing it?
Actually, a lot of large retailers are already doing this. They're all using a best-in-class solution like Signifyd, and what that gives them is an opportunity to provide a much better experience than their competitors in this space. We are still very early in this journey. There is a large opportunity in this space, and it comes down to education and awareness. Most people aren't aware that it's an easy solution to just get up and running with. And as we continue on this journey of awareness, we expect every retailer to want to implement something like this.